Good afternoon, collectors and friends. Welcome to Trading Card Therapy, episode number 105. You are in for a real treat today. Thanks for tuning in. In just a few minutes, we're going to bring on our special guest. And if you are into vintage signed cards, I assure you, this is a must-watch episode. But speaking of signed cards, before I bring in my friend Marty, I want to show this off, and I want to know if this has ever happened to either you, Marty, or anyone else out there, that you forget you have something. And in particular, these are signed cards, which is why I decided to bring them up today. So I was doing a little cleaning, if you will, after the National. And a number of years ago, I should have started with this one. A number of years ago, when the Namath rookies were a little bit cheaper to get signed, a buddy of mine, Scott, advised me to get a couple of my lower grade Namath rookies signed, and I did. And believe it or not, the first one that got signed, he added the 12 inscription, for his uniform, which is cool. However, I didn't want it signed in that pen, and I'm not so fancy, but they actually either gave me a reduction or for free, and then they switched over and they signed it he signed it in a bolder Sharpie, which I like better, but everyone, I guess, kind of has their preference. And so my question is, has this ever happened to you where, for one reason or another, you got a card in, it wasn't exactly what you thought, you put it aside, and then when you came back to it later on, it's actually worth substantially more than when it was when you first discovered it? And my second question is, I am genuinely curious, do you prefer the, bigger Sharpie, like the wider signature on the Namath rookie, or do you like the skinnier Sharpie? Let me know in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. And for those of you that have not tuned in to last week's episode of Trading Card Therapy, that was really kind of the precipice and the groundwork for today's episode. So Pat Quinn, who is one of the oldest and longest standing dealers at the National Sports Collectors Convention, was kind enough to sit down with me and discuss a number of his adventures in treasure hunting decades ago. And one of those adventures included acquiring a 1933 Goudey Signed Set with a Nap Lajoie, but the asterisk is he got it from a guy, and then he said his buddy was also, his brother was also in competition with him to kind of race and get these sets done as quickly as they could signed. I guess they lived near a particular ballpark. And as the story goes, Pat and this gentleman went to the brother's house. The gentleman asked Pat to basically jump through the guy's window to get the set. I'll let you listen to the rest of the episode for the balance of the story. Without further ado, I'm now going to bring in Marty.
Yeah, happy to be on. It's I was so grateful that you interviewed Pat Quinn. He's literally a legend, and I've heard stories about Pat for years, and I actually got to sit down with him for about 20 minutes at the National, and it was an amazing experience. So,
well, speaking of Pat and seeing as how he was kind enough to give us both a few minutes of his time, tell us about what I guess you believe Pat has meant to your own journey and trying to complete. That's right, folks. You've heard it here correctly. You're trying to complete the 1933 Goudey set, but not just the set with every card autographed.
Yeah, it's been over a 20-year journey, and I'm actually writing a book to document this quest that I've been on. And part of the book that I'm writing, I actually talk about the caretakers of the cards. And for me, why Pat Quinn is so important is he thought enough to not only acquire these cards, but he actually, he had 2 signed sets, which is amazing. And for collectors like me that have been on this hunt for a very long time, there are 4 cards that I have never seen sign. And so I was very interested in asking him about those 4 cards. And he immediately remembered them and said, yes, those exist. And so they're out there somewhere. And, Pat was, amazing dealer in Chicago. People like you are vital to the individuals like us that are the end caretakers of our collections, because you're out there hunting cards and finding collections and, turning up the cards that we're all looking for. And so Pat was doing this in the 60s and 70s. And eye-opening for me when people are walking by these legends like Pat Quinn and don't have a clue of who he is or what he means to the hobby. So again, when I saw your interview, it was just fantastic. So thanks for doing that.
Listen, it's my pleasure. And, I have a couple of follow-up questions, but before I ask them, for me, and I do enjoy the hunt very much, but similar to the way that you're talking about Pat and his journey and how maybe your collection doesn't exist without folks like Pat, my living may not exist without folks like Pat and many others like him, like Levi, who was kind enough to sit down with me at the National. And so, whether it be my son, Crosby, who's 10, follows my footsteps and decides to be in this industry, I couldn't tell you. But I do know that we have a great relationship, and I want him to be able to one day look back, and even if he's not interested in the space, I'd like him to be able to show off to maybe, God willing, his wife one day or his family and his loved ones and say, look what my dad did. And it's not just the buying and selling, Marty, as you can see for me. It's about the preservation of not just the history of the cards, but the history of the story. And it started many years ago by me really just enjoying the stories behind many of the collections I was acquiring. And that was kind of the precipice and the basis of our blog at justcollect.com. But then it became a lot more than that, kind of the way you're indicating who Pat is. Pat was and is vital to who you are in the hobby today, myself included, and many others. So big thanks to Pat for sitting down with folks like me and you and probably many others through the 45 years, Marty. But I did want to ask, because I personally don't know, and I'd love to hear, I'm sure many of the audience members would like to know also, who are these 4 cards that you thought maybe didn't actually exist, but Pat swears he saw them?
There are 4 common guys that nobody's ever heard of. It's Dan Howley, Russell Rawlings, Pete Scott, and Fred Brickell, I think is his name. And, the 33 Goudey set has some minor leaguers in it. And so, again, these guys lived long enough where they could have signed those. I've just never seen them. And again, I say that with full hope that they're out there. And over the last 10 years, cards have been turning up. You talk about another legend is Uncle Jimmie. Everybody heard the story of Uncle Jimmie. And he had an amazing signed 33 Goudey collection. But he only had 175 different cards in the set signed. But he had duplicates of many of them. But he also had the best of the best. He had he had all 4 plus multiples of the Babe Ruths. He had multiple ones of the Lou Gehrigs, and those sold in excess of like $280,000, I think, for the Red Ruth. But when I saw the list, I was more excited about people like Val Penich. Nobody knows who Val Penich was,
but I can see the card because I know the
his last season was well. His last year was 1933, and he played for the Dodgers in Brooklyn, and he retired in 33, moved to Maine, bought a chicken farm in Maine, and died of the flu in 1942. So there were really no known signed Val Penich cards until Uncle Jimmie's collection turned up, and he had 2 of them. And so I have the nicest known Val Penich card. And so, again, people were all excited about the Ruths and the Gehrigs, and I was too. It's beautiful to see those things, but I knew those were going to be 6-figure cards. And, I've got 2 small kids, and, I was more excited about the rarer cards. He had another super rare card. He had a lot of them, but one that I'm really proud of was, I'm going to hack the guy's name, but his name's Pete Jop, and he was tired of people messing his name up. So in January of 1934, he changed his name to Pete Appleton. And so this is the only known card where he solely signed it with his birth name. So, again, that's another from the Uncle Jimmie collection. So what I've been doing over the last few years is trying to reassemble Uncle Jimmie's collection. I have 65 of his signed 33 Goudeys, different 33 Goudeys. So I'm over the 220 mark. I think I have about 223 of the 239 cards in the set signed, and I'm always upgrading. So I've built this kind of vast network across the country. And I think at this point, people are really kind of rooting for me and helping me out. And, I'm really fortunate because I'm in my 40s and I know where the cards that I need are. And they're, and really are in their 70s. And, they might collect Hall of Fame rookie cards or whatever. So, I think time is on my side, and I've made a bunch of relationships. And again, I want to get the book out because I want to tell Uncle Jimmy's story. I want to tell Pat Quinn's story. I want to tell Sean Brennan's story. I want to tell the story of the Detroit Tiger ball boy that got a lot of these cards signed. There's my buddy Jason May, who's started this quest just before I did. There's some really amazing stories of caretakers, and I think this set should be together. And so ultimately the goal is in 2033, we'd like to loan my set to the Baseball Hall of Fame and have it on display to honor the 100th anniversary of the 33 Goudey set.
I think it's a great plan, and I have lots of questions for you. But before I dive into the set and your journey just a little bit further, could you give us an idea of where your journey started? Did you start like all of us, and did you collect just regular baseball cards? And if you did, how did that start? What did that look like? And how did you, migrate over to like this impossible task of getting a signed epic set with 4 Babe Ruths and 2 Lou Gehrigs, dozens of Hall of Famers, one of the most desirable sets in the entire hobby. And instead of just getting it like in high grade, you decided to bang your head against the wall for over 20 years and get it all signed. Please tell us a little bit about this journey and how it all started for you.
Yeah, well, like most of us, I collected when I was a kid. So I was, 12, 13, buying 86 Fleer, 87 Tops. I bought all that stuff, all the junk wax era. And I was really fortunate that I had 2 baseball card shops within bike rides of where I lived, and one of them had batting cages. So I grew up a collector. As a kid in like junior high school, I stumbled upon Jack Smalling's book, and Jack Smalling published a book, and it was everyone's home address who played one inning in Major League Baseball. And so the story, what really happened was I had to take a keyboarding class in 7th grade, and I didn't understand why I needed to take typing. And hindsight, it's hilarious to me because, we all type 24/7. But my teacher said, be quiet and type something and you'll get an A in here. And so I ended up writing to baseball players in my typing class. And my mother was kind enough to humor me and give me stamp money. So I wrote to players that played in the teens and 20s that played for the Brooklyn Dodgers or the Boston Red Sox. I'm a big Boston Red Sox fan. And ended up corresponding with a lot of players, and that opened up some really weird doors. There was a guy named Tony Melanowski that played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. I wrote to him, and he said, hey, there's a guy named Leo Nonnenkamp that lives in your city. I lost his phone number. We were roommates back in the 30s. Can you go by his house, knock on his door, and tell him to call Tony Melanowski? So I literally knocked on this guy's door as a teenager and asked him to call his former roommate, and it opened up Pandora's box. I ended up becoming really good friends with Leo Nonnenkamp. He kind of took me under his wing, and we went to a bunch of minor league games. And then through him, he was a builder for the Red Sox in the 30s. And so I started asking him about his teammates and who he had lost touch with. And through Jack Smalling's book, I ended up connecting him with a lot of his former teammates. And so again, I guess I was like the social network before, the internet for a lot of the guys in the mid 90s. So that was a lot of fun. So fast forward, eBay didn't exist. You couldn't find 33 Goudey cards. But in 1991, I remember distinctly Topps created and released the 53 archive set, which is a reprint set of the 53 Topps set. And also Sporting News created a reprint set of like the Conlon photographs. And it was a really dark set, but it was available at your local retail stores. So in 91, I started writing to all of the players in the 53 Topps set, which was that were still alive in 91. Literally everyone that was still alive in 1991, I wrote them a letter, and it took years, but I eventually got all of those signed. So I have a complete signed 1991 archives set. And a lot of those guys passed away in 91 or 92. So that started it from like when I was a kid. I was, again, a nerdy kid, and my mom humored me. And then I, like all of us, went off to college and, hung it up for a few years. And then what happened was around, I don't know, it's probably around 2005. My mom called, she was downsizing. I went over there and I found all these letters and stuff. And so that kind of reignited the interest, and eBay was around. So I started buying 59 tops. I started working on a 59 tops set and writing to players again. And again, that opened up another Pandora's box, and I kind of got in, was collecting really kind of everything and not really focused. And you talked about, do you forget about cards that you have? Sure, I do. And at this point, I keep a lot of my cards in a safe deposit box, and I don't see them all the time. And really, I'm an extremely private person. And so, a couple years ago in the middle of COVID, none of my friends like baseball. They're big basketball fans, but I ended up going to my bank and I brought all my cards home one weekend. And my buddy's dad is in his late 70s, and I invited him over, and he was blown away. And actually, I was blown away because I had been picking up T206 cards for years, and you could buy them years ago for $20-25 easy, if they're in lower grade. And so I had hundreds of T206 cards. I had actually put together a unsigned 33 Goudey set too, and then all my signed cards. So again, I had like this dining room table full of all these pre-war cards, and he came over and was really blown away. We spent a couple hours like looking at these cards, and he asked me to do an interview with the local Sabre chapter. And they had, again, the Research Society of Baseball, it's typically a lot of older guys. And so they were doing Zoom meetings. And so I agreed to show my signed set. So I created a PowerPoint presentation, and the old guys were blown away that I even knew who these guys are. I'm from Arkansas, and there's so many Arkansans in the 33 Goudey set. So again, how I got focused into it, it was another collector friend of mine. And I didn't have a ton of money 20 years ago when I started this project, but like life is so serendipitous. I thought they were beautiful. I like the art. I'm a big fan of art, and to me, it's the first bubblegum card set. The marketing of it, where they left out the Lazari card, the 157 or whatever it is, and I'm a big history nerd. So you're reading about the marketing ploy where they advertised a 240 card set. They left out one card. They made over $1 million profit in 1933 selling penny packs of gum. So it was a pretty remarkable set. And so Jason May was a friend of mine in Oklahoma, and he was putting together a signed set, and he started flipping me some of his extras. And I thought it would be cool to get 10. So I got 10, and then I got 20, and, slowly building your set and meeting other collectors and trading and flipping and selling and whatever. And a few years into it, Jason decided he had another opportunity. So he auctioned off his set. I was able to get some really rare ones. And again, 20 years has gone by like a flash. And, again, I reached over the 200 mark. I think there's only been 5 collectors that have ever collected over 200 signed 33 Goudeys. And so I reached that, big threshold a couple years ago, and now I'm over 220. And, I'd like to get about another 10 more. So we'll see.
Well, I appreciate the in-depth, description and your journey as to everything that's kind of transpired to lead you to this point. I'm curious, of the 220 or so cards, do you have any of the Roos or the Gehrig so far?
No, it's funny. I laugh about that all the time. I had many opportunities to, and people don't believe me when I say this, I had many opportunities to buy the signed Babe Ruth 33 Goudeys for less than $3,500, less than $4,000.
Oh,
and frankly, I just didn't have $3 or $4 grand at the time to do it. And, again, I say that all the time, and people just don't believe me. But you can go back. I mean, I think it was 2018, I sold off my unsigned set. And at REA auction. I let it go. And, my Babe Ruth went for like $2,500, and they were PSA 2s or 3s, So, I mean, these cards, there's a lot of them. They're readily available. And so, again, I remember the first time I spent $1,000 on a signed 33 Goudey 10, 15 years ago now. And it was like, what am I doing? This is $1,000. That's a lot of money. Like I was raised by a single mom, and we kind of struggled growing up. But it's like $1,000. This is ridiculous. And now I dropped an ungodly amount in the last 3 weeks on 3 cards that I needed. And again, I look at it as a position. I've been really blessed, gotten a really great education. It's been a long, fun journey, and so it really is to me about caretaking. So I want the nicest examples, and I want to tell the stories of the players that people don't know about, or they don't understand their stories, or the ball players of the 20s and 30s. They did it for the love of the game. They weren't making a ton of money, and most of them had jobs in the off season. And so, I've actually wrote biographies in my book on every player that is featured in the set. And again, everybody wants to know about Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig. I know the collectors who have the nicest signed Babe Ruths and the nicest signed Lou Gehrigs. So again, my goal is to collect everything else besides those 6 cards and then display it at the Hall of Fame. I think the other collectors will gladly loan me or loan the Hall of Fame the Ruths and the Gehrigs.
I think you're right. You'll get a lot of support, Marty. I'm curious if you could share, of the 220 or so far, what's one of the wildest acquisition stories that you can share with us that has a really cool story behind, whether it be that card or that group of cards that helped the pursuit of your signed set chase?
I mean, again, it's over 20 years. It's been amazing. I mean, like just 3 weeks ago, I mean, we're talking about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right before the national, this was my first national. Again, I'm low key. I really don't like crowds. I really don't like, I've only set up at a couple of card shows period in my life. And again, I like the community, and I've got tons of friends all over the country, but just because of timing, I've never been able to go to the national. So again, I'm very blessed, but I do try to keep, and I think all good collectors and responsible adults should have a budget. So, I've been saving up some money, kind of a good nest egg for the national. And literally, we were going on vacation as a family the week before. We flew up to Boston, and I caught the Dodgers Red Sox series. It was my daughter's first trip to Fenway. So, again, it was a family vacation, but I knew I was going to fly into Chicago on that Friday. And so I had some little pocket money, set aside. And out of the blue, I get a text message that says literally, hey, there's a signed Tony Lazari 33 Goudey in Arkansas. Are you interested? And I didn't know the number. It wasn't in my phone. And of course I text back, sure, I'd love to see a photo of it. And they said, well, hang on, I'll give you this number to this guy and he'll text you a photo. It's like 20, 30 minutes later, I get a text message, and it's a signed Tony Lazari card that's in Arkansas. And obviously I was blown away because, Lazari, he died in, I think, 46. He was 42 years old when he passed away. And, I've been looking for these cards for 20 years, and to get a random text message, my job, the second baseman of all time, he was one that I needed, obviously. And so I said, sure, I'd be interested. Can you send a photo? And the guy said, well, it's not actually my card. A guy has it. He'll send you the photo if you're interested. And I said, sure, give him my number. And so 30 minutes later, I get this random text message that is a photo of this Tony Lazari, and my jaw dropped. I was like, it's a beautiful card.
But not graded, not authenticated, right?
I want it. I'm interested. The call that I got, I obviously was a signed 33 Goudey guy. It was, I wanted to know the history of the story.
But the Tony Lazari story to me is fascinating. So in effect, someone locally finds you, reaches out. They're not the owner of the card. They put you in touch with the owner of the card. How did they acquire this Tony Lazari, and was it graded or ungraded at the time?
Yeah, it was actually a broker who had acquired the collection, and he sent 40 cards to PSA. And they were all very liquid cards. There were T206 cards of Ty Cobbs and others. And this was the only signed card that they had. And so, he sent me a photo and I said, look, I'm the signed 33. I gave this card is in Arkansas. I'm your guy. Like, I want this card. How did this guy get this card signed? And we had a really good kind of back and forth going. And he said, how much do you? It was a once in a lifetime opportunity. There are only 6 of these signed in PSA station. And so, I gave a strong offer and it was cricket.
The fact that you were from Arkansas, do you feel like the gentleman reached a deal with you because of that? He knew it was going to a good home?
No, I think the gentleman wanted me to have the card. Again, the irony of that was, I made an offer. I didn't hear anything else after I made a strong offer. And it was a Thursday evening. And I kind of went in a conversation with my wife. I was like, well, I'm not going to sweat it if it's happening. I was like, I'm going to the National. I know I've got some leads on a couple other cars and we're going on vacation. So whatever. It was cool to see. But inside, I was like, oh my gosh, how did this card end up in Arkansas? And so literally 24 hours later, I get a random text message from the number. Again, it says, the card is yours. How do you want to complete the transaction? And it was Friday night, about 5:30. And I looked at my wife and I said, you only live once. I got to strike while the iron is hot. And I said, you're in Fayetteville, which is about 3.5 hours from me. I said, I'll meet you at Waffle House in your hometown at 9 p.m. So I told my wife, I'm going by the bank, getting some money. I'm either going to get robbed or I'm going to have a Tony Lazari card. So I drove over 6 hours round trip that night to get the Lazari card. And just on a wing and a prayer, I didn't know who the guy was. It was a random text message. And I pulled up at Waffle House at 9 o'clock and the guy was sitting there. I get out. I did recognize him when he got out of the car. I had set up at a card show 2 times ever in my life. And one of them was in Northwest Arkansas. And so when I saw him, I was like, this guy's legit. Pulls out the Tony Lazari card to be able to acquire that card. And it was in Arkansas. It was just phenomenal.
Well, congratulations on that. What's your advice for someone out there starting a vintage signed set?
Don't.
Drop the mic.
Literally, don't do it. I mean, this is one of the stupidest things ever. You drop it, like don't. I mean, it is unless you have unlimited money and again, I say this like all the time. Like it's people ask, why are you doing this? And again, to me, I know there is a signed set out there, and so I generally I've got good motives. I think there's people that collect stuff and they're just trying to make a buck or, 2 off. I get people that collect cards. I have a collector's bug, just like Uncle Jimmy did, just like the 2 brothers that Pat Quinn talked about who raced to get their signed set. I get it, but these are so rare, especially the vintage cards. There's people that, have put together the 86 Fleer basketball set signed. That's awesome. Again, I'd take that back. If you're going to do a signed set, I would go after the most expensive cards first because they're the most expensive cards for a reason and they're not going to get any cheaper.
Reach out to Marty and help him finish the journey. You can reach out to him on Instagram under Signed 1933 Goudey. But thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right, gang, that was Marty from Signed 1933 Goudey on Instagram. As you can see, is a passionate collector with over 220 cards signed out of the 239 or 240, depending on how you look at the 1933 Goudey signed set. So I ask you, the community, is anyone out there as crazy as Marty and working on any vintage signed sets? I myself am. I'm working on, when I say working on, more passively than anything, but in basketball, 57 tops, 69 tops, and 86 Fleer. And in baseball, 91 Desert Shields and 93 Finest Refractors. So if you have any signed cards from those issues, drop me a line. Maybe we can trade. Maybe I'll pick up a couple for those sets and start pursuing them again. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure you subscribe to our Just Collect YouTube channel. Or if you enjoy your podcasts through listening, please check out our podcast, Trading Card Therapy, on Apple and Spotify and wherever else you enjoy your podcasts. We'll see you real soon.